So today, a federal judge appointed by President Trump, ruled against President Trump. Judge Timothy J. Kelly declared that the White House must reinstate CNN reporter Jim Acosta's hard pass. In other words, he must continue to be granted access to the White House because that's his beat as a White House correspondent. The judge essentially said the president was wrong to take away Jim Acosta's credentials without informing him during their heated exchange that he could or might do so. That's what the judge said today, okay? Therefore, Acosta was never given a meaningful opportunity to rebut the White House's decision. As one who is trained, educated, and practices journalism, the judge's decision seems encouraging. Not because of Acosta and what you or I may think of Jim Acosta, not because of President Trump or what you or I may think of President Trump. It's really more about something that supersedes them both, right? It's about the Constitution that was written in such a way so as to guarantee us something that doesn't exist in some parts of the world, including, by the way, the country where I was born, Cuba. What I'm talking about is the right to question and criticize our government and its elected officials. By the way, words matter. And here's what the words say regarding our government and our government officials and what they cannot do. What they cannot do. Words from the Constitution. Prohibit the free exercise thereof, or abridge the freedom of speech, or the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Stop quote. Man, that's important. It's important to note as well that as an American, one would be wise to defend those words, that right. Whether it's a perceived attack on CNN, your community newspaper who happens to be in a fight with your mayor of your little town, or any reporter who's simply trying to do his or her job. Man, this constitutional guarantee, this is not a limited right. It doesn't say some laws sometimes, or some laws and some actions can sometimes be passed. No. It says no law, no law, no law, no restrictions, no abridgment. That's what our Constitution in the United States of America says. Think about that. Because did you know there's another journalistic community, another journalistic entity, I should say, that also has had its credentials taken away? It too is being denied access. It too is being denied the ability to question our public officials. More on that in just a little bit. Stay with me here, folks. I'm Rick Sanchez. This is RT America. And this is where we believe that it is time to do news again. This is our daily list of the stories that we think that you will be talking about tomorrow. Victory for journalism? CNN keeps its seat at the table. But what was that the only exclusion? This is important. U.S.-Saudi appeasement. Is the U.S. really going too far in its wooing of Saudi Arabian oil and then altering nature? Should we be editing genes in plants and animals? That's a good question. Okay, we're going to begin with the White House. And at the White House, there's a reaction, a judge's rebuke of the decision to ban Jim Acosta from their briefings. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders has issued a statement granting the court what it asked for. Jim Acosta's hard pass to cover briefings at the White House will be, as aforementioned, temporarily reinstated. But as I also just mentioned a few moments ago, and this is important, this right of all members of the press to have access and to question our government leaders is not limited, says the Constitution, to CNN or other powerful U.S. multimedia companies. And we mention this because this journalism entity that you're now watching has also been banned. RT America. Important to note. In this case, it's had its credentials taken away, denying it access to cover Congress. The idea that I, here at RT America, or members of our team, should not be allowed to cover the news in Congress because, well, someone has decided to do pretty much the same thing that happened with Jim Acosta, certainly appears on its face as unconstitutional, as whatever it is that the White House is now not allowed to do to CNN. Yet this journalistic cause doesn't seem to have the same support in the journalistic community. Why is that? I want to go over to the desk now and talk to Ben Swann. We're going to bring him in. He's joining us from Atlanta. Let me tell you why we're bringing Ben in, by the way. This is important. He's an investigative reporter who specializes in media coverage. So we think he's the right guy to talk to in this case. Ben, I guess the first place to start this conversation is the question I just asked. Why is it that we're not hearing the same outcry from the journalistic community about the fact that RT is being essentially banned from covering Congress as we did in the Jim Acosta case?
Yeah, well, Rick, thanks for having me on. I think quite simply the reason that you're not hearing the same outcry is because the outcry over CNN is completely disingenuous. Keep in mind that when Jim Acosta and CNN came forward and said this is not, they didn't just say this is wrong, they said this is unconstitutional. For Jim Acosta to not have a hard pass to be able to sit in the briefing room, in the White House briefing room, and question the president. Okay. And yet, as you've pointed out already, other news outlets are not afforded the same right. If they truly believe this is a violation of the U.S. Constitution, why aren't they standing up for other entities like RT America? And the reason for that is because CNN does not actually believe that it is wrong for this to happen. If it happened under President Obama, very few in the media would say anything about it. If it happened to a different news entity, as you're pointing out with RT America, they wouldn't be saying.
I don't think so. I think you're looking at this from a partisan perspective. I think you're looking at this as Republicans versus Democrats, and this really isn't about it because Fox stood up yesterday and did the same thing we did. I went on the air and I said, I stand with CNN, I stand with Jim Acosta, because I'm a journalist. This is what I've been trained to do all my life. I have to respect and defend others who try to practice this craft. Whether they agree with me politically or not has nothing to do with this. This is not about Jim Acosta. This is not about the President of the United States. I'll tell you what this is about, and I don't know if you think I'm right or not, Ben, but I just think it's important for people to understand that I have nothing the hell to do with the Kremlin. I have nothing to do with, just like Jim Acosta has nothing to do with the CIA. So to blame, let's say, CNN or to ban them from some entity in some place in the world because of something the CIA did or because of something President Obama did or because of something President Trump may have done seems crazy, doesn't it?
No, it does. And let me just make this clear. I don't think it's a partisan issue either. I think it's part of the show. I think it's all part of this Trump show where reporters stand up and they grandstand in a way that they have not done with other presidents. Look, if Jim Acosta would say the reason he wouldn't go after Obama in the same way is because Obama isn't the same kind of president that Trump is. And that's true. But there were a lot of issues, as you know, that could have been raised. Serious issues, not partisan issues, serious issues about what was going on in Syria, what was going on all around the world under President Obama, the killing of U.S. citizens without due process. There was a lot happening. But the media acted in a different way because it's a different show now. It's a different game now. But I do not believe this. I do not believe that CNN or Fox are terribly concerned with the Constitution unless it fits into what they want it to fit into. They do not stand up for your constitutional right to be able to question the president the same way they stand up for what they believe is theirs.
I grant you that, and I understand your perspective, and I'm glad you made that point. But let me push this a little bit further. Why is it, for example, that this particular entity, RT America, is being told that it has to register as a foreign agent, that it's not allowed to be credentialed to cover a legitimate story in the Congress of the United States of America? Wouldn't you think that that would be just on its face absolutely crazy, if not something that we should all be criticizing as journalists?
Well, we absolutely should all be criticizing it as journalists, but you say, is it crazy? Of course it's crazy, but the entire Russia conspiracy scare is crazy. It's not founded in fact. It's not based in any kind of evidence.
But let's put that aside. I don't care about that. Let's suppose Putin is the worst human being who ever lived, and he actually cheated, and he actually tried and he actually went to Ohio personally and moved a couple of buttons on some voting machines. Let's give that as a granted, right? What does that have to do with me? Does Jim Acosta not be able to report because of something Trump did? I mean, should all journalists be held to the actions of whatever government that maybe should people at MSNBC not allowed to be reporting based on what Comcast did yesterday in its stock portfolio?
Sure. No, listen, I completely understand what you're saying, but the problem is that this is actually a situation that the media is helping to create. Okay, Rick? Because here's what's happening. When you have media who refuse to stand up for exactly what you're talking about, because they say, well, there's a Russia conspiracy and Russia's bad, and therefore it's okay what happens with RT America, because the truth is that RT America is a competitor. And so they're okay with that competitor going away, because if you say, oh, well, why don't they care if Fox goes away? Because Fox is not truly a competitor, because they're playing the same game. They're just playing either sides of the same coin. But keep this in mind, too. Keep this in mind, too. The judge who ruled on this would not state that this was unconstitutional. He said that Jim Acosta was not given due process and that the rules had not been laid out for suspending him, which still leaves the door open for this administration and future administrations to create the rules by which this happens.
Ben Swann, my thanks to you for a spirited and delightful conversation. Look forward to talking to you once again. Thanks, my friend.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks.
Well, let's expert, Chris Chambers. He's a journalism professor. He is a professor of journalism, one of those smart guys over at Georgetown, one of the best schools in the United States of America. We are honored to have you, Professor.
Thank you.
Let me ask you a question. I was just mentioning that the same thing that they've done to CNN, I don't know if you agree with me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, it's kind of very similar to what they've done to RT America, because their credentials were pulled and they're not allowed to cover Congress. Does this decision in the case in favor of Jim Acosta help or hurt the RT America case?
I think it helps, because a big chunk of the judge's decision was there was no due process. There was just arbitrary, capricious, even mean-spirited, almost censorship. I don't like you, I don't like what you're doing, get out of here. And there was no apparatus for him to appeal, no notice for him to set, to give his side of the story. RT has that situation in other organs of government where it can now say, well, I mean, we're part of the press. We have our American operation here. The First Amendment covers us. Don't we get a chance to present our side?
It's interesting what you're saying. What I hear you saying is that if they had, in the case of the president and Sarah Sanders and his staff, they essentially one day just announced, okay, this guy, what's his name, Jim Acosta, his credentials are pulled. That's it. Sorry. But they never created the process for Jim Acosta, seems to be what the judge is saying, when they said, look, if ever you touch or tell somebody on our staff that she's not allowed to take the microphone from you, that is grounds for. They never did that. They just decided afterward. In the case of RT America, one day they just made the decision. They didn't say, oh, by the way, you have to meet this criteria.
Right.
Right? Same thing.
It is. It is, because what you're dealing with the First Amendment is you have to say, look, we give you a little bit of leeway to regulate kind of around the edges administratively.
Right.
But you can't go after somebody just for their content, just for their point of view. And even if whether you do that or whether you don't do that, whether you're just being neutral, you still have to give somebody an opportunity to explain themselves when you take something away from them that gives them access to their political leaders. When the press doing its job, in other words. If there's a press pass, if there's an access question, you can't yank that access without giving somebody some opportunity to be heard.
I don't quite understand sometimes. The more I look at this RT situation, situation, the RT America situation, where for some reason, look, we're still going to cover stories, and we're still going to be truth tellers, and we're still going to do it well, and I would argue in some cases better than some of our competition does it, okay? But in the end, it is disturbing that someone's seemingly putting a restriction, almost what the Constitution or what the Supreme Court has called a prior restraint on our ability to do our stories, thereby leading others to also be afraid then to be like us, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an analogous situation, Rick. I mean, you have the president not wanting Acosta around, upset that he's doing his job, basically, and then just getting rid of him. And then you have a news organization, a news outlet, where somebody makes the decision that they're upset with or don't like them either, and can
do you think it's political? Do you think this whole thing about this whole RT America thing is hyper political?
Well, I think it is. I mean, because the Acosta thing was political too, in a way.
Yeah.
And this is political also, because if you think about it, if it's not political, Rick, then why would people make up? Why would you just kind of arbitrarily and capriciously kick out RT and not want to give any reasons? Just like the president is like, well, he attacked an intern, but we have to doctor a video to show that he attacked an intern, and that was evidence at the hearing.
Right.
The judge said, look, even if you had a due process, he probably would get it back because you guys lied about what he did.
Is there some truncation between this Russia story that some people are been going with the whole Russia investigation and RT? Because I really don't see the similarity, because you could accuse the United States of stuff or the CIA of stuff, but what's that have to do with CNN?
I think it's an interesting. There's a lot of weird, people are conflating the Russia investigation with RT, or Putin with RT, or RT with flying saucers. I mean, so RT becomes kind of like a convenient boogeyman.
A catch-all.
A catch-all for a lot of different things, you can't, it's almost irrational, but it's a good target. So when you have a good target, because in a way, an analogy would be Acosta might have been a convenient boogeyman for the president. He might not have it in for him specifically, but it's that part of the press that he does not like, and Acosta was a monster or a goblin that he can deal with. There are people who look at RT as a goblin that they can deal with, and it is irrational.
And it is hyper-political.
It is.
And this has been a very smart conversation, and I'm glad we had it. And I think you're right. I think you're right. What you said at the beginning about the fact that we're focusing attention on this now and going through it and examining it, it's probably good, not just for RT America, but for all journalists to have experienced this thing that the courts just decided in favor of Jim Acosta. Professor, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You honor us. I appreciate it. All right. Now.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.